You know, have you ever really thought about what's going on in the sky right above your head? I mean, it looks like a whole lot of empty space, right? But it's actually home to this massive, invisible highway system, all perfectly organized and kind of hidden in plain sight. You look up on a beautiful, clear day, and what do you see? Just blue, a huge, empty expanse. It feels like a plane could just zip off in any direction it wants to, doesn't it? Well, you might be surprised to learn that couldn't be further from the truth. In reality, that empty sky is totally crisscrossed by what's called the National Airspace System. And honestly, the best way to think about it is like a highway system. It's got express lanes, it's got local roads, and yeah, it even has restricted no-go zones, just like the roads we drive on every day. And just like any good highway system, it has its main arteries. So let's start with the busiest routes, okay? These are the freeways of the sky, what's known as controlled airspace. This is where the traffic is dense and the rules are super strict to keep everybody safe. And here it is. This is basically the blueprint. This is the map that the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, uses to organize the entire sky. Everything you're looking at here is actively managed by air traffic control to, prevent collisions and keep all that traffic flowing nice and smoothly. So this whole system is broken down into different classes, and each one has its own specific job. Think of them as the different types of roads. You've got your interstate highways and your major city roads. We're going to take a look at the main ones, A, B, C, D, and E. Okay, so way up there, starting at 18,000 feet, you've got Class A airspace. This is the exclusive express lane. It's for high-speed, long-distance travel. We're talking passenger jets cruising from coast to coast. And you can't just wander in here. You need specific clearance, which is basically getting explicit permission from air traffic control to even enter their highway. This is, hands down, my favorite description of this. As planes start to get closer to the nation's busiest airports, they enter something called Class B airspace. And this quote just illustrates the shape of it perfectly. It's layered, with each layer bigger than the one below it, just like an upside-down wedding cake. It's a genius way to safely funnel all that traffic coming in and out. So if you look at this chart, you can really see how these airport zones are different. You've got Class B, our upside-down wedding cake, protecting the absolute biggest airports, and it requires that explicit ATC clearance to get in. But then you have Classes C and D, which are around smaller airports. The key rule here is a little different. A pilot just has to establish two-way radio contact. It's kind of like merging onto a freeway that's just a little less chaotic. But, of course, not every road is a 6-lane freeway, right? And the same is true in the sky. If controlled airspace is the highway system, then you gotta have the back roads. And that's what we call uncontrolled airspace. This is known as Class G airspace, and the definition is really simple. It's where air traffic control has no jurisdiction. It's the Wild West of the sky. Just kidding. But it is a lot like the country roads. There are still rules, of course, but pilots are mostly flying by sight and are responsible for seeing and avoiding each other. And if we look back at our map, you can see where Class G fits in. It's typically found really close to the ground, filling in all the gaps underneath those controlled freeway structures. This is where you'd find smaller planes on local flights, maybe some crop dusters, or pilots in training. Okay, now things get really interesting, because just like on the ground, some areas are completely off limits, or at the very least, they require special permission to enter. These are the special use zones. These zones aren't for your regular traffic. Nope. They exist for very specific and very important reasons, like protecting sensitive locations on the ground, making sure our national security is intact, or containing activities that could be really dangerous, like military exercises. So, for example, you see this P40 on the pilot's chart here. That P stands for prohibited, and that's not a suggestion. Flight is completely, 100% banned here. This particular zone protects Camp David, the presidential retreat, and, well, you can probably imagine why they don't want any unexpected aerial visitors. Next up, we've got an area marked with an R. That stands for restricted. Now, flying here isn't totally banned, but it is subject to some really strict restrictions. Why? Because of what's inside. We're talking about things the source calls unusual, often invisible hazards, like artillery fire or even missile tests. Yeah, definitely a place you want to make sure you have permission to enter. And then there's this big outlined area. This is a military operation area, or an MOA. This is basically a dedicated gym for military pilots to practice high-speed, tactical flying. The whole purpose of an MOA is really simple. Keep those training jets far, far away from your average civilian Cessna. So with all these different roads and all these different zones, it probably makes sense that the rules of the road would change too, right?
Let's take a quick look at how the requirements for pilots can change pretty dramatically, depending on where they're flying.
Just take visibility, for example, how far a pilot needs to be able to see. In Class B, that busy freeway around a major airport, a pilot has to have at least 3 miles of visibility. But down in Class G, the rural back road, that requirement can drop all the way to just 1 mile, as long as you stay clear of the clouds. That is a huge difference, and it really reflects how much traffic is in each area.
This chart really spells out the barrier to entry for each class. To even think about getting into Class B, you need that special clearance, a two-way radio, and a transponder, which is just a little device that broadcasts your plane's position to ATC. But to fly on those Class G back roads under visual flight rules, VFR, which just means you're navigating by looking outside, you don't really need any of that stuff. You can pretty much just get in your plane and go.
So when you put it all together, the freeways, the back roads, the special restricted zones, what you get is this incredibly complex but incredibly effective system that allows thousands and thousands of aircraft to operate safely every single day. So why do we go to all this trouble? Well, the number one reason is pretty obvious: to stop planes from running into each other. But it's also about efficiency, organizing traffic so your flight actually arrives on time. And it's also about protecting critical areas on the ground and just generally making sure everyone is safe, whether they're in the air or on the ground below. And that's really the main takeaway here. The next time you look up at that big blue, seemingly empty sky, just remember this incredible, invisible infrastructure that's up there. It is the reason a massive passenger jet, a tiny private plane, and a high-tech military fighter can all share the same space without incident. It's a truly remarkable feat of organization. And that leaves us with a final and pretty big thought. This system was designed for the kinds of aircraft we had in the 20th century. But as our skies start to fill up with commercial drones, automated air taxis, and all sorts of new vehicles, you have to wonder, how is this invisible highway going to have to change to keep us all safe in the future?